you've got to get your heart right, not only physiologically so that you are physically strong, a healthy person, but your attitudes, how the mind works in terms of the heart. I think a lot of people don't understand, Annika, that the heart is 60 times more powerful energetically than your mind. More signals go up from the heart to the mind than go down. And so you want to change your mind, you've got to change your heart, not the other way around.
Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. Hugh Massie, this has been a long time coming, and I'm so grateful for your patience and coming on to Your Brand Amplified today. So first and foremost, thank you so much.
Well, great to be with you, Annika, and I know great things will happen today because today's the right day for us to talk.
Amazing. I love it. So you're the executive chairman and founder of DNA Behavior International. You call yourselves a behavior and money insights company, and your background is very much in the finance world. Talk to us a little bit about that journey and what inspired you to now move into DNA behavior and money insights, and all of the wonderful things that you're doing today.
Yes, so I suppose I call myself a reformed accountant. That's one way of putting it. And I started my career as a CPA. That's the American term, or in Australia, a chartered accountant. Very numbers-focused type person. That's really all I understood. And, analysis, looking at the world through numbers. But on my journey, particularly as a tax specialist, that's a lot of what I did. I had to present work to, clients, different people within the same organization. Someone would ask me the question, but it was somebody else that might pay the bill and review all the details. I realized that there couldn't be a one-size-fits-all approach to that. And, at this time, I'm still fairly young, but I sort of figured out, Annika, that I needed to personalize or tailor-make the experience of the work I was doing to succeed. On one level to be understood, on the other level to get the bill paid, right? And when I decided that my day was up with working in Arthur Andersen and that I wasn't going to go further in my career there, and that I didn't know exactly what I would do when I left the firm, I sort of went with a clean sheet of paper, but I did know that I wanted to provide a personalized experience for high net worth investors. And that led a few months later to me forming a family office financial services business, getting the business, getting all the licensing and everything. And, it was very much around having a tailor-made experience for everybody. And a few years then after that, that I'm in the business, a friend of mine asked me, Hugh, what are you really passionate about? You don't seem that happy with what you're doing. And I said, look, I want to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered. And the fact that just jumped out of my mouth from my subconscious, never been said before, I thought, okay, this is really serious. And so, I'm on that journey and I'm asked that question. I thought, okay, this is so serious. I need to spend some time reflecting, et cetera, et cetera. And what came up for me was really what I'm doing with my clients is wealth mentoring. And I need to focus on their behavior. This is not about financial literacy. And really if I'm going to help people become financially self-empowered, I need to teach them about their talents. That's the source of their wealth. But it's also teaching them about their financial behaviors. And
I think what you're saying there, because we often hear about financial literacy, and yes, we do need that. But people also fall into a trap of not living up to what they're really passionate about, right? Yep. And using the best of their skill set. They get caught in a job like yourself where you're saying, okay, I have the skill set. I'm really, really good at this, but I've reached everything I can in this role and I'm ready to pursue something else. But the fact that you're now taking it further, because when you said family office, high net worth individuals, yeah, there are plenty of them. but it's more of the middle class, right? People like myself who need what you're providing.
Yeah, and I think it's very much inside out approach to financial planning and that wealth management. And I think too often people consider wealth, Annika, is just about money and how much have you got in the bank. And that's the key definer of your success in life or how good you are. And it's far more than that. And wealth management needs to address the whole being. I actually put a blog out about that today because I've been doing, I've done a lot of work in, if you want to call it in the behavioral economics field. I was always scared of that term when I first started this journey 25 years ago because I thought it's very much about investing and biases and things like that, which it is, but not enough was about the whole person. And a professor at Santa Clara University by the name of Meir Statman, wrote a book late last year called The Wealth of Wellbeing and has defined the third generation of behavioral finance as being the need to address the whole person. And where we collaborate is that DNA is able to measure how each person will address the varying life elements and prioritize them. Someone like me is more goals orientated, wants life experiences, but others will put non-negotiable, the family is first. And I want a content, community-based life, right? And others are going to put saving for my retirement as the number one. We all want those same things, but it might be in a different priority, and how we approach it is different. And, the fourth generation of this is going to be what's your heart and how does your heart relate to money? And I think everybody sort of knows that your heart, if it doesn't work, well, it's a life pump, you die. But your heart also has an amazing level of energy. And if you want to succeed in life, you've got to get your heart right, not only physiologically so that you are physically strong, a healthy person, but your attitudes, how the mind works in terms of the heart. I think a lot of people don't understand, Annika, that the heart is 60 times more powerful energetically than your mind. More signals go up from the heart to the mind than go down. And so you want to change your mind, you've got to change your heart, not the other way around. And that's also going to change how you deal with money. If you've got an unhealthy relationship with money, that's going to show up. And so, I think we're just getting there in this world now in financial planning. It's taken a long time in wealth management. While it might sound like woo-woo, the same principles apply for leadership. The heart that you bring to leadership is important. And, while shareholders expect you to make money, that's clear. But if you destroy the people with the wrong culture, which money is the driver of that, what do you got? You haven't got much of a business. And so, these are some of the things that I've learned along the way. But I think that, it's about how do you want to have impact? I realized that 25 years ago when I was asked that key question, it was about really the impact I wanted to have in the world. And I didn't know all these things completely then, but one thing I did know is that as I reflected on this, is money causes stress for people and it changes your behavior, or at least how you're going to react in those stressful situations. And I knew that needed to be understood. And I think that I wanted at first to understand it from a decision-making basis, also to how to handle clients. Today, I also want to understand it because stress causes aging. It accelerates your aging.
Disease.
Yeah. And if we're going to help people live longer and have the money to live longer, then they need to be healthy.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
This is pretty interesting, isn't it? I mean, you sort of got me down all these rabbit holes pretty quickly, but...
That's what I loved. That's what I really love to dig into. And you said that this could sound a little woo-woo, but what I've seen a lot of recently is that the concepts that we think of as more spiritual, we are going to talk about quantum and energy, but the things that we think of as more of the spiritual thing are now being proven with science and with data. Whether it's that we can, generational trauma and behaviors live through our genetics, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, right? So, and money behaviors are learned, whether it's through that. I mean, I didn't grow up wealthy. I grew up in Kansas. My mom was a social worker. My father was a professor at a community college. we had enough. We'd take road trips, not flights for travel. Um, but, but I still learned a lot from the way that they interacted with money, which honestly wasn't fantastic all the time. My father didn't have a great relationship with it, but also we have a background with people who were very wealthy in our past, in our
Yeah.
family. We're able to do a lot. And so I think I inherited that view of being able to pick out the best, when I was a kid, like the best item of clothing in the store, not looking at price tags, but because that was something that I was drawn to. And so even if I wanted to be, I knew I needed to live in this lane, I still had, what is it, the caviar dreams, the champagne tastes, right? With the beer budget.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's good. And, from that, you can learn to make smart decisions.
Yeah.
Because there's a problem with too much money is actually the decisions aren't very wise. And there's a whole lot of other problems and happiness issues that come from that. And then there's the other side of, okay, not having as much or enough to feed yourself is a problem, but you don't need a huge amount of money to actually find happiness.
Right.
And I think that's one of the mistakes for people.
Yeah. And it is interesting. You mentioned that one of the things you love is experiences and travel. And the more that we travel, the more we learn about the world and ourselves and what we could live on very happily in other countries. It could be very different. We are both in the United States right now. You're from Australia originally. I'm Thai and Lao on my mom's side. And I have dual citizenship with Thailand. And when I go there, I say, ooh, I could go down to have, in LA, it's a joke, but it's not really how many jobs do you have? Because just to be able to survive as a single mom here, you have to be making low six figures, which seems like it should be a really good amount of money, right? And so I think about, wow, if I moved to Thailand, I could just do this, I could teach and I could podcast, and that would be plenty, that would be more than enough money for me to live really happily and do anything I wanted in the country. I could go on and about the benefits of a country like Thailand, not just mentally and with the health and the good food and just the way they resource things. But it is hard because I think a lot of people don't have the space to have that imagination of, could I move? Can I change my behaviors? We think that just because we have these certain money behaviors or money blocks that we've learned or that we've given ourselves over time because of mistakes or decisions we've made, that we can't get out of that. So I really want to hear about how you transitioned from working with high net worth individuals, family office, to really becoming this AI-driven data scientist, behavioral analyst with finance to help everyone realize that they can achieve.
So I think the first thing there is, one of the key points was when I was running the wealth management business, as my friend pointed out, when we had this conversation one morning, and we often did that just as part of exploring, our own consciousness, self-development, where are we going type things, just as friends, really. But for her to pick up that I wasn't happy, even though I was financially successful at that time, was pretty spot on, and I knew it. And I wasn't fulfilled, and I wasn't in love with helping people with their investments, even though I'm good at it. And what I'm probably even better at is just more helping people with the overall strategy of what they need to do, where they need to go, understanding complex things, piecing it together, navigating the family dynamics. Well, a lot of that's behavioral, but using my financial brain. But being accountable to people like a hedge fund manager type thing, which is a lot of financial planners, to generate this rate of return, and people walk in and say, well, Hugh, you've offered me this and it's going to get X%, but I was just at dinner last night and somebody's doing this. Why aren't you, look, I just say to them, if that's what you want, I'm not the right person, and this is the service you're going to get, and that's it. But I realized that I wasn't happy doing that, and that I had a childhood dream of having a global business. And I realized that having a wealth management business was not really going to give me a global business as such. But technology would. And I thought, okay, if I build this human behavioral model around people's financial DNA, is what we called it at the time, but we've got business DNA, but their behavioral styles, and build that out through technology, I can have a business with global reach. And technology in 2001 is nothing like it was today, but I could, but I could,
Very,
but I could see it for the times it was scalable then, but now it's really scalable. So I decided to go down that path, but it took, 40 flights in 4 years going from, Sydney to Atlanta to get the system, the technology validated, the psychometrics, meet with people. But underneath all of that, one, I had the childhood dream of a global business, and I had done enough study to know that if you have these dreams early in your life, you're meant to go and do something to bring it to life. And I adopted that. And I realized also that it was important for me to, about flourishing and to take, because I am a risk taker and sort of a pioneering type person, that I needed to have the courage to step way outside my comfort zone and test how good am I and put myself in an environment I could flourish. And that wasn't going to happen in Sydney. In fact, just a little sideline, because you mentioned Thailand before. I actually lived in Thailand for 3 years in my chartered accounting career. So I sort of know what it is to be in a different environment. I lived in Singapore and Thailand for 4 years. But, I realized that's what I had to do. And yes, it comes at some ways at a great cost, but I did it before I got married. I was early enough in my career and life that I was giving myself a long runway to make it work. And if I was going to take the chance, I had to do it. And somehow that's what my life was meant to be. And if you don't give it a chance, probably going to die with regret.
yeah.
I can imagine what my life would be if I was still in Sydney. And I think I might be wealthy financially, but would I be fulfilled?
Right.
No. And I think that's what it is. And even now, I'm 24 years into this journey. I'm still growing, developing. I'm really hitting my strats now. And I might say that to you again in 10 years' time, right? Because I think
probably will, and I'll tell
when
you
you're
the same
doing the
thing.
right things for yourself, that's what happens.
Yeah. Oh, so it took a while for you to develop exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
And then how did you test it?
So, it was just I suppose the testing really came from a little bit in the financial advisory wealth management practice in Sydney with some clients. So I used the system there, and everybody went through the process willingly other than one couple. And okay, that happens. They also didn't last the journey as being a client either as well. And that's partly because of the reason I gave before. Well, I wasn't just going to give them investments or go and find deals to better what they'd heard at the dinner party the night before, right? That just doesn't work. But then I came to America, and while I was validating the system, I would try this out with financial advisors, and I would say, okay, because that was our model at the time. Why don't you do this yourself, and why don't you see how a few of your clients would try it? And then, it builds from there. And some of those financial advisors are still our clients today. And, one step to another, and then it went, we produced the business DNA line so that we could help on organizational behavior. You bring on other employees, and gradually, step by step, it goes. But, in a way, this was done from a suitcase in the sense that I didn't know anybody in America. I built affiliations because of the validation studies, but it literally was me here coming and finding myself, finding a market, creating the market. And, through this journey, Annika, the whole field of behavioral economics is unraveling. People today know what it is, but it's very fragmented. And I think, my part of my future is consolidating it more, is what I would say. And I've got a strategy for doing that. But that we'll wait to see how that comes to fruition, because I'm going to London tonight to have meetings with the people where we're going to, start that journey, because we've got the technology pieces that enable that to happen.
Yeah. And technology, of course, has changed, which I do want to get into. But before we go there, you mentioned, the business side of things. And I do believe that we bring our own personal hiccups or hangups or thoughts about money into our businesses, whether we mean to or not. So can you talk a little bit about that and the research you've done and how you've helped people change that part of themselves?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I work on with people is sort of the pretty philosophical question of how do you define your success? Because I think that a lot of the hang-ups about money and the judgment comes and is related to that. And particularly being around a lot of entrepreneurs who are always comparing themselves to somebody else. Well, gee, he's 35 and he's got a Bentley and he lives in this neighborhood and his business is already, or her business is already turning over X and they're doing Y. Well, a lot of the time you don't really know the truth of all of that. You don't know all of the journey, how they got there, and you don't know what other problems they have, right? And so why do you want to compare yourself to that? And, I try to get people to think about it's your race, it's your life. This is going to happen in your time frames. But if you compare yourself to others, you will destroy yourself mentally, right? And you will make, with that, very bad decisions inside your business. There'll be problems with your employees, that go with that, untold stress at home and personally. And so, there is no right or wrong answer. There's nothing about saying, okay, you're 50 years old and you should have X dollars in the bank. What happens if you do have that number and then at 60, you're divorced and you've lost 75% of it and you did a bad business deal? Are you half as valuable or less than that as a person? And I think these are the types of things this is sort of the high level way in which I deal with this with people is, to look at themselves as their own entity and really not compare themselves to any other person and get them to make decisions on that framework and within their energy. And because we've all got the potential to flourish at different times in our lives. And it's about helping set people up to be financially free enough to take opportunities when they come. But opportunities aren't going to come until you are working on your purpose and you're very clear about that. And the more that you are in sync with your purpose, the more opportunities will come, and the right opportunities and the right people will show up. It all works together. And that's when the flow comes, right?
And it's funny how that happens. And one thing I'll say is I've been on both sides of, being married, having access to a lot more financial accessibility, freedom, ability to spend whatever I wanted on charity, those kind of things. I did have a small real estate business, but I was mostly a stay-at-home mom. And then going through divorce and having to start over and hearing people say, oh, she's not going to be a socialite anymore. This is just a very specific time in my life, right? Because she doesn't have all that money anymore. But that was a certain perspective. Or I was even told, you need to find another wealthy husband because otherwise you're not going to be able to hang out with us because you can't afford to do the things we want to do. So that was one perspective. On the other hand, I had the nonprofits I worked with still asking me to be involved with them because yes, I donated money, but that wasn't my value, my full value.
It was about you.
They saw the things I could bring to the table, the ideas I had, the initiatives I would present as being more valuable. And that really did help me reshape and reform my life. And I would say it's a much nicer feeling when you get to live in your purpose. Sometimes you get tamped down, whether it's in a place of work, a relationship, a family, construct. And it takes a while to be fully who you are and live in that purpose and that vision that you're talking about. And when you do that, it's so much more satisfying to see what comes. And even if you make mistakes time and time again, you're learning from them. And then I get to have conversations with people like you who can give even more advice and help me continue down that path.
Well, I think Annika, the thing that I would observe out of this, and this is probably the word I haven't mentioned yet, but that is associated with this is identity. And in a way, as sad as it would be for you and your children, getting divorced. I mean, I've not gone through that, so I don't know what that's like, but I can imagine, it's a trauma, and But you might also say, well, it's a black cloud that's been lifted off me. And okay, the great thing is that these organizations are valuing you for you and not for money, right? And that's in a way got to be more fulfilling, right? And out of that, you can build your identity now based on Annika Jackson and not somebody else or who you're supposed to be, or these other people that are judging you based on what class of travel do you fly on. I mean, I find that every time I hear people talking about all that kind of stuff, there's a whole lot of other stuff that's pretty rotten in their lives, right? And so that's a house of cards. And, you know, your wealth is you and your talents, and I think it's your identity. And that's the opportunity that you have now, is to create your identity as a self-made woman in a way, you know, okay, I'm making mine as a self-made man. That might be different, but not entirely. But
Right.
by coming to a new country and doing it, you know, in essence from scratch, and, you know, without the judgment, oh, well, Hugh, you know, you came from Z suburb. I always hate that question. Where did you come from or whatever? What school did you go to? No, it's about my identity.
Right.
And that's part of what I do with DNA behavior, as much as the, you know, and we're talking about still coaching people with money, because it's not just about investing.
Right.
Wealth is going to come from your identity, which is coming from your purpose and values and whatnot. And that's the thing that needs to be understood for people. And, you know, of course, the other part is what I talked about before, is getting all the monkey talk out of your head about what you should be doing or what somebody else has got. What area of society do you fit into? You know, because for me, I don't care anymore. And, you know, if someone wants to judge me based on the fact that I drive a Lexus and not a Bentley, or haven't got my own jet, great. But they don't know what I've got either.
Exactly.
Right? And I want to keep it that way.
Well, yeah. And I could not agree more with that sentiment. When I moved back to Los Angeles, I did start over, and it's been a really beautiful journey ever since. And that's going on, 6+ years. And I really love who I am today. And I love what I do. And I couldn't see myself doing anything different. And that has also then helped me shift my energy, whether it's with work, with my passions, or with money, right? And so I do want to get into your, using AI now, which is obviously it existed, but we weren't talking about it the same way in 2001. So I'd love to hear how you incorporate different aspects of machine learning or artificial intelligence or generative AI into your workflows and into the systems and processes that you're setting up.
So it's been a sort of a several-fold step, but if I keep it simple, the core DNA behavior business that I started, in 2001 involved people having to complete a profile, like you would go online and do DISC or Myers-Briggs. We had our DNA behavior version that, psychometrics that I got validated. So people would spend 10 to 12, still do it today, still spend 10 to 12 minutes online. And then we produce all of this reporting about your talents, about your financial behaviors. And then there's, a pathway of coaching, training, development that you can go on with that. A lot of it's pretty self-explanatory. And then in 2023, we put an AI module in there that instead of having to have a coach or a facilitator take you through it, you could go to what we call Gene AI. So we came up with a name that was neutral, male, female neutral. So Gene figures for that. And Gene relates to DNA. Nice. And you can ask Gene any question you like, and it provides scripts, coaching tips, insights. What's Hugh Massie's brain going to say about your profile or to do? It's all there. This reading 20,000 pages of documents, basically everything that I've created since 2001. And, we keep updating it.
Yeah.
But then I said to my team at the end of 2023, what if we reset our moonshot goal and said that by 2030, we want to impact 1 billion people or help 1 billion people become informed in some way about who they are and make better decisions? What do we need to do? Well, you're not going to get a billion people in a 7-year time frame to complete a profile that takes 10 to 12 minutes. But it can be done with AI. And we had a few years before explored a process with one of our clients, and it never went any further than that. So we kept that work, dusted it off, tuned it up, and then with the technology that you've got today, we built an AI module. So we call it the AI digital scan. And so what now is able to happen is that we can get a profile on any person without them having to complete their assessment. And that changes the game. You know, if you think about it, you're a financial advisor and you've got 1,000 families, rather than getting, which is 4 people on average, rather than getting them all to complete a profile, which takes quite a lot of time and effort, you can now use AI and get that at a pretty accurate level that at least gets you up front to say, oh, gee, Mary and John are this way. I'm going to need to tailor the experience. And then they've got a couple of kids. That's the way it's going to work for them. And, you customize the experience, put a tailor-made suit on them, which was always my goal at the start, right? And it now works from the get-go. No effort. And then you could do the same with all your leads and prospects.
Wow.
So that's where AI has now become the game changer. And for us, we've gone from a database of 3.25 million people having completed profiles over the last, 23 years, which is not bad, actually. We're not, from a startup, but now today we've got 200, and we're only 6 months into this year. We've got 210 million people in the database.
Oh my gosh.
From digital scans.
Wow.
And, so that brings up a whole lot of other questions. How to, deploying it, monetizing it. But, we're working with clients. We've got one client this year. There will be, just in one financial advisory practice, 100,000 people done. Sorry, 400,000 people done. And so the game now gets changed. We have done a study of the leaders of every public and private company, right? We built a platform to do it called Pegasus Ratings. And we're now able to upfront evaluate their leadership and how that relates to profits. Well, if you're going to make a decision about a company, why wouldn't you want to look at that? I mean,
no, that's such a great point. And I'm just wondering, so you are working with all of these financial planners, but as individuals, are we also able to work with your organization, take the test?
Yeah, I mean, like for you, I can give you the links afterwards. We're not a firm of individual coaches as such. So most of it does happen through, our network, but everybody can get served. We are working on a platform that would be more consumer-centric, and it'll be very heart-centered to help people, build a flourishing heart, if you want to call it that, with this knowledge. But we've typically worked with advisors and coaches because of the facilitation. But with AI, more can be done.
Yeah.
And so that is we are opening that up a lot more through varying platforms, and technology makes it easier for us to do, Annika.
And this is such a no-brainer to bring into even, when we think about instead of thinking about financial literacy as the concept, thinking about your money DNA and money behavior. I'm creating some curriculum for middle school and high school kids right now. And I could see bringing this into the classroom and having all of those students go through, so I see this having such, yes, you're having an amazing impact. You're reaching so many people right now, but also on the individual basis, I can see so many more people being impacted and people being able to take it and share it with their friends and family and then having everybody else take it. And that it just continuing to exponentially enhance the impact, Hugh, that you're having.
So we can, for example, for you doing that, I could set you up with a link that even if it wasn't all of the questions that got answered, I think for kids particularly, it'd be better they went through it and they answer, we've modularized it so they could just answer 17 questions. It'll take 2 or 3 minutes. Out pops the style. Now you know what that means. It can be sent to their parents. Like my 2 children are 14 and 12, they did it 2 or 3 years ago, and my son was at Money, a money camp for school just last week for school holidays. Where our kids are on school holidays here in Georgia now. And, he's learning things and he could translate that he is more of a spender and, into the shiny objects. He understands that and what that potentially means, that the budgeting is going to be the challenge out of that, right? But I think that can be taught to these kids early on with some simple messaging.
Right.
Yeah, because I think everybody wants to learn something about money.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be too technical.
Well, we've talked about how you developed this program, speaking about behavior, finance, incorporating artificial intelligence technology to reach more people. Let's talk about the quantum part, because you also talk about the quantum laws of money energy, making these quantum leaps. And you did mention earlier that if you are living in your purpose, that things come to you more easily. So I'd love for you to expand a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that the way I want it to be heard for everybody is that we all have an unlimited potential in the context of our own lives. Everybody can earn an unlimited amount of money if they want to in the context of their lives. We're not all going to be Elon Musk as such or Steve Jobs, but you can put yourself in an environment where a lot could flow in, and that as much of this is about you could have a lot of impact in your life, so you could have an exponential impact. And within that, there's going to be a time window where you probably make a quantum leap, because even for people like Elon Musk, it didn't happen in a straight line. Nothing in life happens in a straight line. But there is a time when if you get everything in flow, if you want to call it that, you get synchronized, you're going to go from, make a big jump from A to F pretty quickly. And that's what I call the quantum leap, and it could be just a small energetic shift or a couple of small energetic shifts. And it could be just one big shift that sets you up. And in your life, you might have a number of these. But the more that you are on purpose, living your purpose, doing the things that you love, you've got clarity of the direction. It's interesting how the right people show up. If they show up at the time that it's not right for you, then nothing's going to happen. But if that same person shows up at the right time, that's when opportunities come, because I do believe opportunities come through people.
100%.
And, there can be ideas that come down to you, like I call it, from information packets, that you might capture in meditation, like in quiet time. But to assimilate those ideas, you still need to be clear about your purpose and and who you are. But them getting actioned is going to come from somebody turning up at the right time. And when that happens, you can make a quantum leap. As much as, I don't want to be analytical, even taking, you and your divorce, that's a trauma and you probably don't want to go through it, but maybe that created an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
The right people are going to come in your life that propel Annika Jackson forward, right? Hugh moving from Sydney to Atlanta and going through varying stages of the journey. I've got people that are coming that, like a guy I was working with this afternoon on our Flourishing Heart concept, which is the consumer version for DNA in the future. I met him 24 years ago at the start of my journey, but it wasn't right for us to be talking about what we're going to do now. He reached out to me earlier in the year and sort of with a Christmas card that I hadn't heard from him in a while, but he did that with a number of people. I was the one who responded, and we got on the phone and we've unpacked something magical. And, I think that's part of what you've, got to do. And we've both been, if you want to call it business-like in that, we've tried to do it on all the principles we've talked about today, but also can something be impactful be done? How are we going to manage ourselves and each other, in this? And he's got a business life as well that adds a dimension to what we have. And I've got obviously what I do, but that opens up an opportunity for the quantum leap, right? But I think it is about timing. Maybe you've got to clear away a few black clouds, in your own life. And there's got to be, at some level, there's got to be a motivation then to do it too.
And it's funny because we hadn't even started this conversation. And before we jumped on, I said, it's good that this conversation is coming now because things always happen at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're sharing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, every day that, that I live, things get, even though people have always said, well, Hugh, you've always been very clear, it gets clearer and clearer and more pinpointed. And the more it gets pinpointed, the more good things that can happen.
Beautiful.
And they can happen quicker. And I think that's part of that. I think that, we've all probably got a 5, 6, 7 maybe year window when things really do flourish. That doesn't mean your life ends when that period ends, but that's where you start to see a big jump. Yeah. And for some people, that happens when they're 22. Others, it happens when they're 65. There's no right answer to that.
Absolutely. Oh, and you do have, because you don't have your consumer product out yet, but you do have a book that people can read to get a lot of this advice. Financial DNA, Discovering Your Unique Financial Personality for Quality Life.
Absolutely. So a lot of this is in there, and the methodology of how to do that. There's plenty of ebooks on our website that you can go and get. Like there is a Money Energy ebook that's a good read that probably plays into a lot of the concepts that we've talked about today. There will be a full-scale book at some point. So on our website at dnabehavior.com, there's plenty of resources about all of these things. And if anybody listening today does want to go through their own profile, you can reach out to me and I will get a link sent to you. It's still consumer friendly. I mean, there's people doing this every day, but I think how we productize it in the future and take people online through a journey and they end up with their own book because we've all got a life story. I think that's what we can do, empower, through our system and AI.
Absolutely.
Everybody will have a book, right?
Yeah. Yes. There's a lot for us to unpack and talk about beyond this short amount of time we have together. So that I'm really excited about that. But I do also want to talk about your philanthropy and working with Boys Without Fathers specifically.
Yeah.
Because you have your own children, you have your family unit. Tell us a little bit about this profit and what inspired you to be involved?
So the inspiration came about 3 years ago. I was doing, maybe it's 4 years ago now, time's got along quickly. It might have been 4 years ago in September. I did 6 podcasts in a row with our clients. I was doing identity conversations with our clients. And 6 weeks in a row, these men from different backgrounds all didn't have a father. And they were sharing the outcomes of that. And particularly one of them it was so impactful. His father had, left the home when he was about 1. And, for Greg, it had an enormous impact. And when it came to time in his life to do a PhD, he did it on basically being a boy without a father, if you want to call it that. And, and there's now extensive research on it, but it brought out, it is a trauma, and here are some of the things that can happen. And they're describing all those things, and I'm thinking, well, gee, that's my life too, because my dad died when I was 1, right? And my mum's pregnant with my brother. And I always knew that from the time of starting DNA behavior, that I wanted to do something with youth development because I didn't have the mentoring. And this was a vehicle to do it, but I didn't know how to do it. And when I went through that experience of the podcast and I learned what the issue was for me, then the plane landed and we all agreed that we would set up this charity called Boys Without Fathers. And I somewhat initiated it. And it so happens that our, day-to-day company president, Leon, is also a boy without a father.
Oh my gosh.
That there are more of us in the client base, right? And there's some girls also without fathers in there, and the issues are different. And the issues are different for, if you didn't have a mother, right? But I can only speak to the Boys Without Fathers piece, but it's got an importance in society because boys who don't have a father tend to have an aggression streak. Now, my mother would say that I was more aggressive as a child than my brother. My brother wasn't born. And I think that the issues are different there. Still issues, but they're different. And in a way, I had a sort of an aggressive mentality perhaps, but some of that's frustration. But also I got bullied too, right? And I went to an all-boys boarding school. And I think the thing is that for some of these kids, though, that aren't as lucky as I was, because my mother did a pretty good job at giving me and my brother the best education you could get and life for the circumstances. But kids don't all get that. And then they end up on the streets. They end up with the wrong crowds. And that's why you see so many in jail, right? Doing bad things. And I think that's part of what needs to be stopped. And, some of it comes from just personal fear, not having confidence, not being picked up by somebody and shown a pathway. Like a guy I help a lot, been helping a lot here in Atlanta from Ghana. When he was 11 years old, he was sleeping in bus shelters, right? Somebody picked him up and put a tennis racket in his hand, and he became, he became all Africa national champion type thing, given us college scholarship here in the United States. And he runs, part of his work is, the Hope Performance Tennis Foundation. Well, now 2,500 kids, and I help him with that. 2,500 kids are getting a better life experience through tennis. It's not only how to, becoming a good tennis player. Some of these kids coming out of Ghana are very good, right? But it's the life experience and the character development and all those things that you don't get if you don't have a father. And so that's really where it is. And I think, for me, probably this will come together more and more through the personal development coaching for these kids, but also sports, because I like sports. Yeah. And I think sports is a great outlet.
I'm just amazed. I'm so glad I asked you this question, because I have a foundation that works in Ghana. And the online school that I work for is primarily tennis students who can't attend a normal school because they're training, they're practicing. So we have some things to talk about after this.
Yeah, I think we do. We do have something to talk about, and maybe we need to get that connected up.
Absolutely.
And we maybe, know the same person involved with this. But anyway, so yeah, that's fantastic.
Amazing. Well, I've really, Hugh, enjoyed our conversation. We've gone to multiple places, but I think that, it's interesting because I've had a couple of other guests in the past few weeks that haven't brought your perspective, but have talked about energy and quantum energy and abundance and how, we do have to take the steps to get there. We have to live in our purpose and our passion.
Yeah.
And I think that's something more and more people are becoming aware of. And by you offering your perspective, having this deep understanding of finance, it gives it a whole other levity, right?
Yeah, because money is a currency, but also money is behavioral, and money is what you think money is, right? And money, to some degree, it's just a sheet of paper. In some ways, is what you put energy on, and that's life. Life is somewhat what you put energy to, right? And that's what happens.
So we're obviously going to link to your website, your book, your LinkedIn, but I also, Hugh, want to ask you if you have a favorite. I'm sure you have many, but do you have a favorite or one that comes top of mind right now? Quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto that continues to inspire you on this journey?
So what I say to everybody is dream big, have that big dream, start small and finish big.
Thank you so much. Again, just really enjoyed this conversation, and I can't wait for continued conversations.
Absolutely, Annika. I think we're off to a much bigger journey here.
Yes, likewise. Thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. I will be back with another amazing guest to share their story and their journey, and hopefully give you as much insight as I get when I get to speak to these wonderful people. With that, I'll see you again very soon. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.